The morning begins the same way it has for the past 5 years. I wake up to an empty bed with only one side clearly dented. My side. The other half of the bed is perfectly flat like it's been ironed, just like my days since Vivian left. My name is Leonard Pierce, but everyone always called me Leo. All my life I've worked as an electrical engineer, coming home tired but proud to feed my family and make a decent living. Now I'm 67, and what do I have left? A house in a quiet suburb of Springfield, where the silence is broken only by the neighbors' lawnmowers and the hum of birds. A pension that allows me not to count every penny, and a loneliness I've never gotten used to. I lower my bare feet to the floor, fumbling for my worn slippers. Rays of May sunlight shine through the blinds, streaking the parquet with streaks of light. My joints protest as I stand up, reminding me of my age. The mirror reflects a gray-haired man with deep wrinkles and a stubborn chin, a Pierce family trait. In the kitchen, I'm brewing coffee strong, with a minimum of sugar. Vivian always said that kind of coffee would kill me someday. I wonder what she'd say now, seeing how I live my life. Probably she'd shake her head and start putting order in this house, which is slowly but surely filling with the loneliness of an old man. Breakfast became an hour-long ceremony. I used to swallow toast and coffee in 15 minutes, rushing to work. Now time flows differently. I slowly spread jam on toast, read the newspaper from cover to cover, including the weather forecast and obituaries. Occasionally I look through the names, afraid I'll run across familiar ones. The doorbell interrupts my ritual. Standing on the doorstep is Selma Andrew, my neighbor on the right. She's about 45 and works as a freelance interior designer. When she moved into the house next door a year ago, I was indifferent to it. Another person I'd have to say hello to on a chance encounter. Who would have thought it would be Selma who would be the anchor keeping me in this world? "Good morning, Leo." She's holding a container of blueberry muffins. "I baked too many this morning, thought you could use them." We both know she makes them especially for me. It's become our unspoken pact. I pretend to believe her explanations. She pretends not to check if I'm okay. "Come on in. Coffee's just about ready," I invite, knowing she'll say yes. Selma slips inside, bringing with her the scent of fresh pastries and light perfume. She moves through my kitchen with the ease of someone who's been here regularly, pulling out cups, finding creamer in the refrigerator.
"How's the knee?"
She asks, pouring coffee. The usual, predicts rain better than any meteorologist. Selma smiles. There is no pity in her smile, for which I am especially grateful. After Vivian died, my friends and acquaintances looked at me with such pity that I wanted to scream. Selma, on the other hand, treats me like a normal person, not like an unhappy widower in need of care. "Are you cleaning today?" she asks, looking around the kitchen. After a few months of getting to know each other, Selma has offered to help me with the house cleaning. "You don't know how to use a vacuum cleaner, Leo, admit it," she declared then. I wanted to object but realized she was right. Vivian had always taken care of the house and I had always taken care of the repairs and the garden. After she died, the house slowly sank into neglect until Selma showed up. "Thursdays, remember?" I replied, taking a bite of my muffin. "It's damn good, by the way." "Don't forget to take your meds," she reminds me, pointing to the pill box on the table. "For your blood pressure and your joints." I'm not old enough to forget those things, I grumble, but I take the pills obediently. We spend the next hour talking about nothing and everything. Selma talks about her new project, decorating the twins' nursery. I share my observations of a pair of cardinals nesting in a tree in my garden. Ordinary, simple themes, but they fill the house with the sounds of lively conversation. When Selma leaves, she has a meeting with a client. The house falls back into silence. I step out into the garden where I have beds of vegetables and herbs. Vivian always said I had a talent for gardening. After her death, I expanded the vegetable garden, growing not only tomatoes and cucumbers, but also peppers, eggplants, and various herbs. Working in the garden calms me down. allows me to think about simple things: watering, weeding, pruning. Today, however, my thoughts persistently return to my son Ashton and his wife Belinda. Our relationship is not a warm one. Ashton is my only child, 42 years old, average height, with my gray eyes and chin. But the character is more like his mother, just as stubborn but soft inside. We've never been particularly close. I worked a lot when he was growing up, was away from home a lot, and when he was home, he was always fixing things, building things, tinkering in the garden, anything to avoid talking about feelings. Vivian was a buffer between us, a male-to-male translator. After her death, my son and I were left alone, not knowing how to communicate without her mediation. Our conversations have become an exchange of information about health, about work, about the weather. Ashton calls once a week, comes once a month, usually with his wife Belinda, and these visits always feel like the fulfillment of an obligation rather than a desire to see each other. Belinda. She came into Ashton's life 8 years ago. 38 years old, works as a receptionist in a dental practice. For the first 2 years, I tried to make her like me, a widower trying not to ruin my relationship with the only woman in my son's life. But gradually, it became clear that we were two different people. She looks at me and sees a retired man with a house, a car, and savings. I look at her and see a woman who wants all that for herself and Ashton. "Why don't you help with the down payment on the house?" she asked me at dinner one night, casually. "You live alone in such a big house anyway." I didn't say anything, though I was seething inside. Vivian and I had bought this house with our own money, saving money, working overtime. And now some woman who had come into our family only a couple years ago was insinuating that I should help them buy a house. That conversation was the first crack in our relationship that eventually turned into a chasm. For the past few months, Ashton and Belinda had been visiting me more often than usual. Each visit has been accompanied by hints of their financial difficulties. The washing machine has broken down. The car needs repair. The mortgage payments have gone up. I am neither blind nor deaf. I understand what these conversations are about. They think I'm sitting on a bag of money just waiting to make them happy with my generosity. But the truth is, I didn't work hard to provide a carefree life for my grown son and his wife. I worked so that Vivian and I could face old age in peace, travel, and not worry about medical bills. Fate had it differently. Vivian left early and all our plans fell apart. Now this money is all I have left of our life together, of our dreams. And I'm not going to give it away for nothing. I think back to Ashton and Belinda's last visit a month ago. Belinda asked about my health with feigned interest, and then casually mentioned that their landlord was raising the rent. "It would be nice to have a house," she sighed. "But with these prices and interest rates..." I pretended not to take the hint and change the subject. Something inside me snapped. Was this what was left of our family? Trying to get money out of an old man? Does my son see me as nothing more than a purse with legs? The ringing of the phone interrupts my gloomy thoughts. Ashton's name pops up on the screen. "Hey, Dad." His voice sounds cheerful, too cheerful. "How's it going?" "Fine," I answer dryly. "What's wrong?" "Why, what's up?" He laughs nervously. "Can I just call my father?" "Of course you can. I don't believe a word of it, but you usually call on Sundays and today is Wednesday." Pause. I can almost see him gathering his thoughts. "I've got good news, Dad. I've been promoted to deputy shift supervisor. Congratulations," I say sincerely. Despite all our difficulties, I'm proud of my son. To get to this position without a college degree is truly an accomplishment. "Belinda and I want to celebrate," he continues. "We're having a family dinner this Friday. Will you come?" I hesitate. Family dinners have become a battleground lately where I fend off direct and indirect hints of financial assistance, but refusing would offend my son, who already thinks I'm a callous old man. "Of course I'll come," I decide. "What time?" 7 o'clock at night. Don't bring anything, we have everything. Can I bring anything? I ask him at the same time, out of habit. Well, maybe a nice bottle of wine. I hear Belinda's voice in the background. You know how we like it. Of course I do. The most expensive one at the store. Okay, I agree. See you Friday. After the conversation, I stare at my phone for a long time, feeling vaguely uneasy. Something's wrong with this invitation. Usually Ashton calls a week or two in advance if he's planning a family dinner. And here, all of a sudden, in the middle of the week, 2 days in advance, and that nervous excitement in his voice. It's like he's embarrassed, but he makes himself sound happy. Maybe it's not just the promotion. Maybe they've finally decided to openly ask for money instead of hinting. Or is it something worse? I go back to weeding the beds, but thoughts of the upcoming dinner don't let go. I think about the phrases I'd heard, the looks Ashton and Belinda had exchanged the last time they'd visited. Something they were up to, and I wasn't going to like it. Vivian would know what to do. She always knew how to diffuse a tense situation, find a compromise, keep the peace in the family. I, on the other hand, am blunt to the point of rudeness, calling things by their proper names and expecting the same from others. No wonder my relationship with my son and daughter-in-law is so complicated. It's getting close to lunchtime, but I have no appetite. I force myself to make a sandwich and eat it, drinking iced tea. Vivian has always scolded me for skipping meals, especially when I'm nervous. You become unbearable when you're hungry, she said, putting a plate in front of me. Eat first, then worry. How many times in these 5 years have I caught myself talking to her even though she's gone? Talking about my day, asking for advice, complaining about my back pain or Belinda's tactlessness. Sometimes I think I hear her answers, not as a voice or hallucination, but more like an inner knowing of what she would say. After lunch, I decide to lie down, an old habit I've never been able to get rid of. 15 minutes with my eyes closed and my thoughts become clearer, my worries recede. At least, that's how it used to be. Today, however, sleep doesn't come and I toss and turn on the couch, going over possible scenarios for dinner. The doorbell rings, making me wince. It's Selma again, this time with a pot of blooming hydrangeas. "This is for you," she says, holding it out. For that empty flower bed by the veranda, I stare at the soft blue blooms and feel something tighten in my chest. Vivian loved hydrangeas, especially blue ones. Selma couldn't have known that, but somehow she guessed it. "Thank you." My voice sounds hoarse. "You want to come in?" She shakes her head. "I can't. I have a client in half an hour. Just wanted to drop this off on the way." I nod, still looking at the flowers. "Leo!" Selma touches my arm, drawing my attention. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," I answer automatically. But then I meet her scrutinizing gaze and sigh. "No, I don't know. Ashton invited me to dinner Friday night. He said he got a promotion at work. That's great." She smiles, but then she notices the look on my face. "Or is it?" "It's not about the promotion." I shake my head. "There's something wrong with this invitation. It's too sudden, too contrived." Selma looks at me thoughtfully. "Do you think they're asking for money?" "Most likely." I nod. They've been kicking around for months now, hinting at financial difficulties. Maybe they've finally decided to ask me directly. "What are you going to tell them?" I shrug. Depends on how much money they're talking about and what they need the money for. If it's for something really important, medical treatment or education, I would help. But if it's for a new car or another gadget, again. "You're too hard on them," Selma says softly. "I'm a realist," I object. "They're adults, they both work, why should I pay for their whims?" "Maybe it's not about the money," she suggests. "Maybe they have really good news and they want to share it with you." I hum incredulously. Selma doesn't know Belinda like I do, but I don't feel like arguing, especially with the person who just gave me Vivian's favorite flowers. "Let's hope you're right," I say conciliatory. Selma smiles and says goodbye, promising to come back tomorrow morning. She cleans my house on Thursdays. I watch her get in her car and drive away, and I think about how strangely life works. A stranger who happens to live in my neighborhood has become closer to me than my own son. The rest of the day passes in the usual cares. I plant hydrangeas in the flower bed on the veranda, cook myself a simple dinner, watch the news on TV. But my thoughts keep returning to Ashton's upcoming dinner. Something tells me that this evening will change our relationship, and not for the better, I'm afraid. Before I go to bed, I stand at the bedroom window for a long time, looking out at the starry sky. Somewhere out there, among the stars, Vivian is watching me and probably shaking her head as she sees me drifting away from my only son. But what can I do? I don't know how to pretend. I don't know how to pretend everything is okay when it's not. I can't turn a blind eye to Belinda's selfishness and calculating nature, to Ashton's weakness and not being able to stand up to her. What would you do if you were me, Viv? I whisper into the darkness. There's no answer, but I don't expect one. Some decisions can only be made on your own, even if they break your heart. Thursday morning was overcast. The sky was covered with gray clouds, with occasional shy rays of sunlight breaking through. Perfect weather for what I was going to do today. For a week now, I'd been putting off seeing a lawyer. Each time I found an excuse, rain or bad health, or suddenly I had things to do in the garden. But today I decided enough was enough. I must get it over with before dinner at Ashton's. At breakfast, Selma called to say she'd be an hour late. A client had rescheduled a meeting. I said it was a good thing. I had things to do in town and we'd miss each other. She didn't ask, for which I was grateful. I didn't feel like explaining where I was going or why. At least, not yet. Getting dressed, I picked out my one good suit, the same one I'd buried Vivian in. I'd only worn it a couple times since then, to my niece's wedding and to an old friend's funeral. The suit hung in the closet, neatly packed in a case, as if waiting for a special occasion. And so it was. The suit fit looser than I remembered. I'd lost weight in 5 years, not dramatically but noticeably. Vivian always made sure I ate well. After she died, I often forgot to eat, especially in the first year. Then it got better, especially when Selma came along with her constant containers of food and insistent reminders about breakfast and lunch. I looked at myself in the mirror. Strict navy blue suit, white shirt, conservative tie. This is the look of a man about to rewrite his will, a man who has decided to break the unspoken rule. Everything must stay in the family. The office of Norman Willis, my attorney, was located in downtown Springfield in an old red brick building. I had known Norman for over 30 years. He had helped Vivian and me buy a house, drafted our first wills, handled our affairs after her death. A reliable, thorough man, not prone to unnecessary talk, just the kind of man to handle delicate matters. Mr. Pierce, his secretary greeted me, a woman my age with neatly styled gray hair. Mr. Willis is expecting you. Please come in. Norman's office hadn't changed in decades. The same heavy curtains, massive desk, bookcases filled with legal tomes. Only the computer became thinner and more modern with each visit. Leo, Norman stepped up to meet me, extending his hand. It's good to see you. You look good. You're lying, I grinned, shaking his hand, but thanks for the compliment. We exchanged the usual pleasantries about the weather, about our health, about Norman's children, who had long since grown up and moved away. Then he folded his hands on the table and looked at me over his glasses. So, you wanted to discuss the changes in the will. I have the paperwork prepared according to your instructions from last week. Do you want to go over everything again? I nodded and he turned the monitor toward me, where a document was open. I read it slowly, even though I already knew the contents. According to the new will, my house, half of my savings and the rare stamp collection I'd collected all my life went to Selma Andrew. Ashton was left the other half of his savings, his car, and a few valuables that had belonged to his mother. From the outside, it looked strange, even wrong. Why would an elderly man leave a significant portion of his possessions to an estranged woman, and not to his only son. But Norman didn't ask questions. He was just doing his job. "That's right," I said when I finished reading. "It's ready to be signed." "Are you sure?" Norman took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Leo, we've been friends for years. I'm not getting into your business, but as a friend, I'm asking, have you thought this through?" I sighed. "Of course I've thought every day for the past 3 months, ever since Selma literally saved my life. It was in February. Heavy snowfall, ice. I slipped on the porch, fell, couldn't get up, badly bruised my back. My phone was left in the house, no one outside. I lay out in the cold for almost an hour until Selma came home from work and saw me. She called an ambulance, stayed with me in the hospital, brought me home, nursed me for weeks until I was back on my feet. All this time I called Ashton, left messages, but he didn't call me back until 4 days later. Said he was on a business trip and his phone was dead. He came to see me a week later, sat for half an hour and ran off. Urgent work commitments. Belinda didn't come at all. Supposedly she had a cold and didn't want to infect me. That's when I realized who really cared about me and who was just pretending. And I decided to change my will. "I've thought it over, Norman," I said firmly. "Selma cares for me more than my own son. She deserves it." Norman nodded without arguing. He slid some papers and a pen toward me. "Sign here, here, and here." He pointed to the lines. "And date it." I took the pen, hesitated for a moment, then resolutely signed all 3 copies. May 22nd, 2025. The day I officially recognized that my real family wasn't the one by blood. "I'll mail you a copy of the document," Norman said, gathering up the papers. "The original will stay in my safe as usual." "Thank you." I stood up, feeling strangely relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "How much do I owe you?" Norman told me the amount and I wrote a check. We shook hands and I left the office feeling like I closed an important chapter in my life. Outside, a light rain began to fall. I pulled up the collar of my coat and walked to my car. Memories swirled in my head, vivid, painful memories, like shards of a broken mirror. Ashton at 5 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the zoo, enthusiastically pointing at the giraffe. "Daddy, look how long that neck is. How does it sleep? I mean, his neck doesn't fit on the pillow." Ashton at 12, silent, withdrawn after I'd missed his performance in the school play because of a work emergency. "It's okay, Dad. I understand. Work is more important." Ashton, at 18, leaving for college, not a prestigious one, but a good one that Vivian and I had saved up for. His determination to prove he was worthy of our pride. And my inability to express that I'm already proud of him, just for being my son. Ashton, at 21, dropping out of college after 2 years of school. "This isn't my thing, Dad. I want to work, not sit over books," my frustration I couldn't hide. Our first major conflict. When exactly did we start drifting apart? Maybe when I couldn't hide my disappointment over dropping out of college, or earlier when work always came first and family was somewhere in between, or even later when he'd brought Belinda into the house and I'd immediately sensed something fake about her but couldn't keep my mouth shut. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof of the car. I sat without turning on the engine, immersed in memories. The hardest was the time after Vivian's death. She died suddenly, a massive stroke. Making breakfast in the morning, not breathing in the afternoon. Ashton was 37 at the time and had been married to Belinda for 4 years. They came to the funeral, stayed for a week, helped with the formalities. Then they went back to their lives, leaving me alone with an empty house and a deafening silence. Ashton called every Sunday, asking how I was holding up. I replied that I was fine. What else could I say? That I wake up every morning and forget for a split second that she's gone. That I talk to her when no one else can hear. That sometimes I sit in her chair, breathing in the fading scent of her perfume and cry like a baby. Pierce's men don't talk about these things. Don't show weakness. Don't ask for help. That's how my father raised me. That's how I raised my son. and the result is two lonely men unable to bridge the gap that grows between them every year. The rain ended as suddenly as it had begun. I started the car and drove home where Selma was waiting for me, with her infinite patience and the care I didn't deserve but desperately needed. The house greeted me with cleanliness and the smell of lemon polish. Selma had already finished cleaning and was now sitting in the kitchen, leafing through a magazine.
"How did it go?" she asked, still looking at the page. "Where are you from?"
"You're wearing a suit, Leo." She looked up and smiled.
"You only wear it on special occasions. Besides, you've been mysterious and avoided talking about your plans for the morning. It's not hard to guess that you went on important business."
I took off my jacket and hung it on the back of the chair. "Do you have time? We need to talk." Her smile faded and there was concern in her eyes. "Is something wrong? Are you not feeling well?" No, I'm fine," I reassured her. "It's just, I was at the lawyer's, changed my will." "Oh." She put the magazine aside and straightened up. "And you want to discuss this with me?" "I want you to know." I sat down across from her and folded my hands on the table. "I've signed over most of the property to you." The silence that followed my words was almost palpable. Selma stared at me wide-eyed, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Leo," she finally said quietly. "Why? You have a son. You've done more for me than my son has in the last 5 years," I interrupted. "You take care of me. You're the reason I don't feel alone. You deserve that." "Does Ashton know?" she asked, still shaken. I shook my head. "Not yet, no. I'm going to tell him. Someday." "Someday?" She raised her eyebrows. "Like at dinner tomorrow night?" "No." I stood up and walked over to the window. "I don't know. Maybe." "Leo." Selma stood up and walked over to me. "You have to talk to your son. Explain your decision to him. Give him a chance." "A chance at what?" I turned to her. "To start acting like he cares about the inheritance." "No, thank you. I prefer honesty." "It's not fair to him," she said softly. "You're not giving him a chance to change." "It's too late for people my age to change," I grumbled. "And it's too late for my son." Selma sighed and put her hand on my shoulder. "You're a stubborn old man, Leonard Pierce, but that's exactly why I care about you," I hummed, trying to hide how touched I was by her words. "And then," she added with a slight smile, "you can write anything you want in your will, but I hope I don't see a dime of your money for a long, long time." "You're the only woman who says things like that to me," I grinned. "Because I'm the only woman who doesn't need your money," she parried. "I need you, alive and well and not so moody." She headed for the door but stopped on the threshold. "Think about talking to Ashton. Not about the will, but just, talk. A real talk about the things that divide you." After she left, I stood at the window for a long time, staring at the freshly planted hydrangea. I couldn't get Selma's words out of my head. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should try to patch things up with my son before it was too late. But every time I thought about the possibility of a conversation, the image of Belinda calculating, manipulating my son, seeing me only as a source of money, came to mind. And my resolve melted, giving way to bitterness and resentment. That evening I pulled out an old photo album, the one of Ashton as a child. A little boy with my eyes and Vivian's smile. Carefree, loving, trusting. When and how did I lose that boy? When did this wall of misunderstanding and alienation come between us? Maybe if Vivian had been alive, things would have turned out differently. She was always able to smooth out sharp corners, find compromises, create bridges where I saw only abysses. The picture on the last page is of Ashton, Vivian, and me at his high school graduation. We're smiling, standing close together, a real family. What's left of it now? Two halves that are growing farther and farther apart. I closed the album and put it back on the shelf. It's time to go to bed. Tomorrow's the big day, dinner at Ashton's, and something tells me that this night will change our relationship forever. As I lay in bed, I thought about Selma's words. To be honest with my son, give him a chance, try to patch things up before it's too late. Good advice, good advice.
But I wasn't sure I was ready to follow it.
There were too many resentments, too deep a gulf between us. I turned on my side, staring at the empty half of the bed. What would you advise me, Viv? I asked mentally. And I could almost hear her answer. Be yourself, Leo. Just don't forget that your bluntness sometimes hurts people, especially the ones who love you. With that thought, I closed my eyes and fell into a restless sleep, filled with memories of the past and worries about the future. Tomorrow's dinner awaited me like a test for which I was not prepared. You are right, I deviated from the plan. In concept, there should be no reconciliation in the story. I'll rework the last few paragraphs to fit the plan. Friday morning was overcast. I was on pins and needles all day going over possible dinner scenarios in my head. Anxiety wouldn't let up for a minute. I even called Ashton to make sure the meeting wasn't canceled, so strong was my desire to delay the inevitable. It's still on, Dad. My son's voice sounded tense. We'll see you at 7. At 6:30, I was already standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my shirt. Not a suit, of course. That would be overkill for a family dinner, but not casual clothes either. Dark blue pants, light blue shirt, leather shoes. Formal enough for a special occasion, but without being overly flashy. On the table in the hallway was a bottle of wine, dry red, aged, expensive, but not outrageously expensive. Next to it was a small box of chocolates for Belinda. I didn't have warm feelings for her, but decorum was the rule. The doorbell rang in surprise. It was Selma. I thought I'd stop by before you left, she said, eyeing me appraisingly. You look fine. A real gentleman. Thank you. I shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. Did you come by to wish me luck? This too. She handed me a small package. Here you go. It's for your grandson or granddaughter if you ever have one. I unfolded the paper, and inside was a tiny knitted sweater in a neutral green color. Did you knit it yourself? I asked, touched by her gesture. Sure, she shrugged. I thought it might help lighten the mood, a sign that you're thinking about your family's future. I folded the sweater carefully and tucked it back into the paper. I'm not sure it'll come in handy, but thanks for the thought. Just be yourself, Leo, she squeezed my shoulder lightly. But try not to be too yourself. I grinned, realizing what she meant. Not to be too direct, not to say everything I think. Good advice, albeit hard to follow. Call me when you get back, she said, heading for the door. I don't care what time, I want to know how it went. The drive to Ashton's house took less than 20 minutes. I parked 2 houses away. All the closest spaces were taken. It was weird. They didn't usually have a lot of cars. Maybe they'd invited someone else to this dinner. The thought of that didn't add to my confidence. As I approached the house, I noticed the windows were brightly lit, muffled voices coming from the ajar window of the living room. I took a deep breath, exhaled, trying to calm my nerves, and pressed the bell. Ashton opened the door. He was wearing a new shirt and ironed pants, clearly dressed for a special occasion. Hi, Dad. He hugged me with one arm, patting me on the back. Come on in. We've been waiting for you. Belinda met me in the living room, smiling, in her new dress, a glass of wine in her hand. There were appetizers and an open bottle of wine on the table. Leo, how nice to see you. She came over and kissed me on the cheek. She smelled of wine and too sweet perfume. Come in. Make yourself comfortable. I handed her the candy and wine, which she accepted with ill-concealed disappointment. Apparently, she was expecting something more expensive or exotic. That's very nice of you, she said, setting the bottle on the table without looking at the label. Ashton, pour Daddy some wine. The living room looked different from the last time I'd visited a month ago. New cushions on the couch, a painting on the wall that hadn't been there before, a large plasma TV instead of the old one. Even though they were complaining about financial difficulties, something didn't add up. "A raise?" I asked, nodding at the new TV. "Nice model." Ashton and Belinda exchanged quick glances. "Yeah, we're celebrating ourselves," Ashton said, handing me a glass. "Especially since it's coming up. Honey, why don't we talk about this over dinner?" Belinda interrupted him with a strained smile. "I just have to check on our casserole." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me and my son in an awkward silence. I took a sip of wine, not bad, but nothing special. It looked like store-bought, mid-priced wine.
"How are you doing, Dad?" Ashton asked, sitting down across from me.
"How's your back? Is it still bothering you from that fall?" "I can barely feel it anymore," I answered, surprised by his interest. He didn't usually ask about my health so specifically. "The doctor says I've recovered surprisingly fast for my age." "That's good," he nodded. "Belinda and I were worried when you went into the hospital."
"It's a shame we couldn't visit you more often."
I held back the urge to remind him that they hardly ever visited me at all, but I decided not to start the evening by complaining. "That's all right. Selma was a big help." Ashton's face tensed slightly at the mention of Selma's name, but he tried to hide it by taking a large sip of wine. "Yes, that neighbor. She's very thoughtful." Belinda returned with a plate of appetizers, olives, cheese, crackers. Everything looked nice, festive. They were clearly trying to impress. "Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes, she announced, sitting down next to Ashton. "In the meantime, let's enjoy an aperitif. Leo, would you like to try this cheese? It's imported from a small farm in Vermont." I took a piece of cheese, noting to myself that it must have cost a lot. Another inconsistency with their stories of financial hardship.
"So, Ashton, tell me more about your promotion," I suggested, hoping to hear something that would explain all this ostentatious luxury.
"Well, it's not a big promotion," he fidgeted awkwardly. "Just deputy shift supervisor, a little raise, a little more responsibility." "But we're so proud, aren't we, darling?" Belinda put her hand on his knee. "It's the first step to becoming plant manager."
Ashton smiled weakly,
clearly not sharing her optimism. "I'm a long way from being plant manager," he said.
But yes, it's a good step forward.
The conversation drifted from one safe topic to another: the weather, the city news, the recipe for the casserole Belinda had prepared for the occasion. The atmosphere remained taut as a string.
I sensed that both of them were avoiding some important topic,
going around and around, waiting for the right moment. When we finally sat down at the table, Belinda had already opened a second bottle of wine. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, her movements more relaxed. She talked a lot, laughed a lot, but I could see the tension in her eyes.
"You know, Leo," she said as she poured me a large portion of casserole,
"Ashton and I have been thinking a lot about the future lately, about how important it is to have a home, a corner of your own." This is it, I thought. Here we go. "You have a house," I remarked, pointing my fork around. "It's quite nice." "It's rented," she grimaced. "It's not the same as owning it. Having to depend on the landlord's moods all the time, not being able to make major repairs. Not to mention the money that goes down the drain," Ashton added, looking down at his plate. You pay, and you end up with nothing." I nodded silently, waiting for him to continue. They were clearly onto something, and I wasn't going to make it easy for them. "Anyway, we found a great place," Belinda continued, refilling her glass. "A house in a good neighborhood, not far from here. 3 bedrooms, backyard, 2-car garage. It's a dream come true." "Congratulations," I said dryly. "When are you moving in?" Ashton and Belinda exchanged glances again. "Well, it's not that simple." Ashton cleared his throat. "You see, it's not a good time to buy a house. Interest rates are high, real estate prices are high."
"We don't have enough for a down payment," Belinda said bluntly, taking a big sip of wine.
The bank requires 20%, and that's a huge amount.
I leaned back in my chair with my arms crossed over my chest.
And you want me to give you that money?
It wasn't a question. It was a statement. They were finally getting to the point.
I didn't, Dad.
Ashton corrected quickly.
Borrowed it. We'll pay it back when we sell my car and…
Don't sell the car, Ashton. Belinda interrupted him with an irritated wave of her hand. We've been over this. You can't get to work without a car. But you said… I said we'd find a solution, she turned to me. Leo, you realize that this is a chance for us to finally find stability. A home isn't just a roof over our heads, it's a future. I sipped my wine slowly, considering my answer. They were obviously counting on my help. This whole dinner had been planned for one purpose: to convince me to splurge, hence Ashton's promotion, the new TV, the expensive cheese, a demonstration that they were successful and reliable, that the money would go to work and not be wasted. How much do you need? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. The private investigator I had recently hired had given me a full report on the financial situation of my son and his wife. 60,000, Ashton answered, swallowing nervously. We've already saved 20, but the house is worth 400,000, and you need 80 for the down payment, I finished for him. And where's the other 20 you've supposedly saved up? There's less than 5,000 in your joint account right now. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Ashton froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Belinda went pale, then flushed. Where did you… she started, but I held up my hand to stop her. It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you're lying to me. You don't have any savings. On the contrary, you have loans on 2 credit cards that you barely service by paying the minimum amount each month. Ashton lowered his eyes, his face a mixture of shame and anger. Belinda straightened, a dangerous glint in her eyes. Were you following us? She asked icily. Checking our accounts? How could you? I have a right to know what my money will be used for, I said calmly. If that's what you're asking me for… We're not asking, Ashton objected, finally looking up. We're offering an investment. The house will go up in value over time, and you won't be able to pay the mortgage, I interrupted again. Your joint income barely covers your current expenses, and you want to take on a mortgage for a house you can't afford. Belinda stood up abruptly, knocking over her glass. The red wine ran down the white tablecloth like blood. Pay the mortgage, old man, she shouted, eyes blazing. All of it. You're sitting alone in your big house, counting every penny. Who are you saving it for? For your precious neighbor? I slowly put my fork and knife down on my plate and straightened up. Inside I was seething with anger, but outwardly I remained calm. I'd worked all my life to provide for my old age and to help my son get back on his feet. The key word was help, not support him and his wasteful wife. Dad! Ashton finally raised his voice, his tone pleading. Belinda didn't mean it, we just… No, that's exactly what I meant. Belinda turned to him. How many times can we beat around the bush? Your father is rich, healthy, and selfish. He could easily help us, but he'd rather watch us wallow in debt. Belinda, calm down. Ashton tried to take her hand, but she yanked it away. I'm not going to calm down. I'm sick of living in a rented house, counting every dollar, putting off having children because of the lack of normal conditions. Meanwhile, your father is spending money on this Selma. I stood up looking her straight in the eye. I don't spend a dime on Selma. She's the only person who takes care of me for free. Unlike some, I shifted my gaze to my son. When I fell and ended up in the hospital, where were you, Ashton? You didn't answer your phone for 4 days and then you came for half an hour and disappeared. Is that taking care of your own father? Ashton lowered his eyes, unable to find anything to say. We had an important meeting at the bank, Belinda intervened. We couldn't miss it. It was about our future. Oh yes, the future. I nodded as if I remembered something. The future for which you, Belinda, meet Trevor Higgins every Friday at the Redwood Inn. Or the future for which you, Ashton, lose hundreds of dollars at underground poker tournaments. The silence that followed my words was absolute. Belinda went pale,
grabbing the back of her chair to keep from falling. Ashton sat frozen like a statue, a look of horror on his face. "How?" he began, but his voice trailed off. "A private detective," I answered bluntly. "A very thorough and meticulous man. He has photographs, printouts of accounts, witness statements. Everything you need to get a complete picture of your family life." Belinda made a strange sound, a sob or a groan, and ran out of the room. A few seconds later, the bedroom door slammed. Ashton and I were alone in the dining room. He sat with his head down, his shoulders slumped. "Why, Dad?" he asked quietly. "Why did you hire a detective? Couldn't you just say no?" "I wanted to know the truth," I answered, feeling the anger slowly changing to cold determination. "And now I know it. You're both lying to each other, to me, maybe even to yourselves." Ashton looked up, tears in his eyes. "Dad, please don't do this," his voice shook. "Don't do what?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. "Don't tell anyone about what you found out, especially about Belinda and that man. If it gets out, our marriage will fall apart." "Your marriage is already broken, Ashton," I said harshly. "You're just pretending everything's fine, and you want me to pay for that pretense." "Please," he folded his arms pleadingly. "We can fix this. We can start over. I'll quit poker, I'll talk to Belinda, but if you tell anyone about what you found out—" At that moment, Belinda returned, her eyes red with tears, but with a determined look on her face. "I've packed," she said to Ashton, ignoring me. "I'm going to my sister's. I need to think." "Belinda, wait." Ashton stood up, holding out his hand to her. "Let's talk." "About what?" She grinned bitterly. "About your father spying on us. Or that you didn't say a word in his defense when I yelled at him." She shifted her gaze to me, a mixture of anger and shame in her eyes. "Are you satisfied, Leo? You destroyed our family." "You destroyed your own family, Belinda," I replied coldly. "I only showed you what you both refused to see." She grabbed her bag and ran out of the house, slamming the door loudly. Ashton stood in the middle of the room, lost and broken. "Dad," his voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry, my wife. Don't do this. Don't ruin what little we have left." I looked at my son, a man I had once known, but who now seemed almost a stranger. A man who chose to be cowardly silent when his wife insulted his father. A man who asked not for forgiveness, but for the truth to be hidden. "I have nothing more to say, Ashton," I said, heading for the door. "Not to you or your wife. You're on your own. Don't expect any more help from me, financial or otherwise." I walked out without turning around, feeling the weight on my shoulders grow lighter with each step. I may have truly ruined their family, but at least I would no longer be a part of this farce. The road home seemed endless. I walked slowly, not noticing the cool evening air or the occasional passerby, casting curious glances at me. The events of that disastrous dinner replayed over and over in my mind. Belinda's scream, Ashton's silence, the look of horror on their faces when I revealed the cards. I felt devastation, but not regret. The truth is always better than a lie, even if it hurts. This thought has accompanied me all my life, shaped my actions, shaped my relationships with people, and today I once again prove my loyalty to this principle. Although the price was high, perhaps the final break with my only son. By the time I reached home, it was about 9 o'clock in the evening. The lights in Selma's windows were on. She was obviously waiting for my return as promised. But I needed time to gather my thoughts before I told her what had happened. I made my way to my study, a small room at the back of the house where I kept important documents, bills, and books I liked to reread. Opening the bottom drawer of my desk, I pulled out a brown folder labeled Harrison Investigations. Inside was a report from Raymond Harrison, the private investigator I'd hired 3 months ago. This decision didn't come spontaneously. It was preceded by several strange events that made me wary. First, Ashton started calling more often than usual, inquiring about my health with an uncharacteristic insistence. Then came the sudden unplanned visits, during which Belinda invariably brought up finances, the house, retirement savings.
You're well off, aren't you, Leo?
She'd ask, as if by the way. It's so important to have a financial safety cushion these days. And finally, the drop that overflowed the cup was their visit after I returned from the hospital. While Ashton was helping me with my medication in the kitchen, Belinda was discreetly, she thought, going through my bank statements on the table in the living room. I noticed this when I returned to the room earlier than she expected, and her confused face told me all I needed to know. The next day I called Raymond Harrison, an ex-cop who was a private investigator. We knew each other through a mutual friend, and I knew he was discreet and efficient. I need to know what's going on in my son and his wife's lives, I told him, especially in the financial realm. Something is causing them to take a heightened interest in my savings, and I want to understand what it is. Harrison didn't ask too many questions. He named a price. We signed a contract, and he got to work. 3 weeks later, I had the first report on my desk, and a month later, I had the full dossier. What I found out shocked me, although, admittedly, I had suspected before that all was not well in their family. I opened the folder and began to reread the facts I now knew almost by heart. Ashton, my son, had been attending underground poker tournaments in the back room of Mike's bar for 2 years. He started small with $20 or $30 bets, but gradually the amounts grew. For the last 6 months, he'd been losing an average of $800 to $900 a month, money he didn't have. To cover his debts, he'd taken out loans, remortgaged his car, even borrowed from his co-workers against his future paycheck. Belinda apparently didn't know about her husband's gambling. She had her own secrets. Every Friday, she ostensibly attended a refresher course in a neighboring town, but in fact met with one Trevor Higgins, a realtor from the real estate agency where she and Ashton once looked for a house. The meetings were held at the Redwood Inn and usually lasted about 2 hours. Harrison delicately noted that the nature of the meeting suggested a romantic relationship. Finally, and most importantly, their financial situation. It was much worse than I had realized. 2 credit card debts totaling almost $12,000, an overdue car payment, utility bills, and yet regular big spending sprees, designer clothes for Belinda, electronics, dinners at expensive restaurants. Living beyond your means had become the norm. It pained me to read it. Not because I was judging them after all. Everyone has the right to live as they see fit, but because it was clear to me now. Their sudden interest in my finances was driven by desperation. They were looking for a way to solve their problems at my expense. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, feeling tired and frustrated. This was not how I had envisioned a relationship with my son in my 67 years. I had hoped for mutual respect, support, maybe even friendship. Instead, I got manipulation, lies, and betrayal. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my gloomy thoughts. I knew who it was. Selma had promised to stop by when I got back. She always kept her promises, unlike some people. Opening the door, I saw her, concerned but trying to hide her anxiety behind her usual smile. "So, how did it go?" she asked, walking into the house. "From the look on your face, not so good. That's putting it mildly." I closed the door and followed her into the kitchen, where she was already putting the kettle on. It had been a disastrous evening. "Tell me about it." Selma pulled out cups, brew, cookies, everything I needed for a long conversation. She knew where everything was in my kitchen better than I did. I sank into a chair and began to talk. About the tense atmosphere at the beginning of the evening, about the new things at Ashton and Belinda's house, about their inquiries about my health, which gradually turned into a conversation about the house they supposedly wanted to buy, about how Belinda got drunk and started screaming, demanding that I pay off their mortgage, the way Ashton kept quiet, not standing up for me, and finally about how I revealed what I knew about their true financial situation, Belinda's secret affair and Ashton's poker debts.
My God, Leo.
Selma shook her head, pouring the tea. How did they react?
How do you think?
I grinned bitterly. Belinda ran out crying, and Ashton begged me not to tell their secrets. Not for forgiveness, mind you, but for secrecy. Selma silently handed me a cup of tea and sat down across from me. I could see that she was thinking about what she had heard, trying to find the right words. "Did you hire a detective to follow them?" she asked at last. "When?" 3 months ago, I took a sip of tea hot, strong, with a pinch of cinnamon, just the way I like it. After the time I caught Belinda looking at my bank statements. "And all this time you knew about their problems, but you never said anything." What was I supposed to say? I shrugged. "Hey, son, I know you're losing the family money in poker and your wife is cheating on you with a realtor." I was hoping they'd handle it on their own, or at least be honest with me if they really needed help. Selma stirred her tea thoughtfully with her spoon. I knew that gesture. She always did it when she disagreed with me but didn't want to argue. "What?" I asked bluntly. "I could see you wanted to say something." "You could have talked to Ashton earlier," she said softly. "Before things got so explosive. Maybe offered to help. Not money, but advice, support." "And you think he would have accepted it?" I shook my head. Ashton had always been proud. We're alike in that. He'd deny everything, say I was meddling in the wrong business. "Maybe," Selma agreed, "but you would at least try. And now there's a gulf between you." She was right, and it was annoying. Maybe I really could have done things differently, talked to my son alone without Belinda, offer to help without accusing. But I'd chosen the confrontational route, and now it was too late to regret it. "What are you going to do next?" Selma asked after a pause. "Nothing." I set the cup aside. "It's their problem now. They'll have to deal with it themselves." "Leo," Selma covered my hand with hers. "He's your son, your only child. Are you really ready to just cut him out of your life?" I looked at her hand, small, with neat nails covered in colorless polish. The hand of someone who cares about details, about order, about other people. The complete opposite of my rough, calloused hands, used to physical labor and solitude. "I'm not crossing him off," I finally said. "It's just, I need time, to see if anything can be salvaged, and whether I want to." Selma nodded, not removing her hand. "I understand. Just don't make decisions in haste. Give yourself time to cool down, to think." "I've been thinking about this for 3 months, I countered. "Ever since I got the first detective's report. And you know what I realized? That my son is a stranger to me. I don't know what he lives, what he thinks, what he feels, and he doesn't know me." "That can be changed," Selma said softly. "If you both want to. And if you don't?" I looked her in the eye. "What if he doesn't want to? Or I can't?" She didn't answer, but in her gaze I read what she was hesitant to say out loud. "Then you'll be alone, Leo, with your pride and your principles and your empty house." We finished our tea in silence. It was getting late, but Selma was in no hurry to leave, as if she sensed that I shouldn't be alone with my thoughts. "Do you want to watch TV?" she offered, putting the cups away. "There's supposed to be a documentary on the History Channel about World War II. You like those?" I nodded, grateful for her attempt to distract me. We moved into the living room, turned on the TV, and settled on the couch, a safe distance from each other like the two good friends we were. The movie was really interesting, about little-known Allied operations in North Africa, but I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts kept returning to tonight, to the look on Ashton's face when I'd revealed his secrets, the way he hadn't stood up for me when Belinda had yelled, to how easily he let her walk away without trying to stop her, to explain himself. "What are you thinking?" Selma asked quietly, noticing that I wasn't watching the movie. "About how Ashton and I got to this point. I answered honestly. When we stopped being a family and became just acquaintances who called each other once in a while. She turned to me, muting the TV. Maybe after Vivian died, she suggested cautiously. She was the link between you two, so you said. No, before, I shook my head. Much earlier. Maybe when he dropped out of college and I couldn't hide my disappointment. Or when he married Belinda and I knew right away that she wasn't the woman to make him happy. Or even earlier when I'd missed his school events because of work. Leo, Selma interrupted me gently. Don't beat yourself up. Parent-child relationships are always complicated, especially between fathers and sons. You both made mistakes. You both could have done things differently. But it's not what happened that matters. It's what happens next. And what happens next? I grinned bitterly. He wouldn't forgive me for tonight. I destroyed his marriage, his illusions, his idea of me as an easy target. You didn't destroy his marriage, Selma countered. If Belinda was cheating on him and he was playing poker, their marriage was already in danger. You just ripped off the mask of pretense. I nodded, recognizing her point, but that didn't make it any easier. Still, she continued, think about giving him another chance, not now when the wounds are fresh, but later when the passions have subsided. Call him, invite him in for a talk, no Belinda, no accusations, just talk. I stared at the TV screen where soldiers were making their way across the desert, fighting not so much the enemy as the elements. In some ways, it reminded me of my own situation. Not fighting my son, but fighting my own pride, my own resentment, my own frustration. I'll think about it, I said finally. But no promises. Selma nodded, realizing that was the best I could do right now. She knew me well enough not to push. We finished the movie in comfortable silence. By the time it was over, it was past midnight. Selma got up, getting ready to leave. Thanks for listening, I said as I walked her to the door. That's what friends are for, she smiled softly. You get some sleep. Things will look different in the morning. I nodded, though I didn't believe the morning would bring any new solutions or relief. Some wounds were too deep to heal overnight. After seeing Selma off, I returned to the office, where the folder with the detective's report was still on the desk. I picked it up, intending to put it back in the drawer, but opened it instead, flipping through the pages, looking at the photos. There's Ashton leaving Mike's bar late at night, his face gaunt, his eyes droopy, the face of a man who just lost more than he could afford. Here's Belinda getting into Trevor Higgins's car outside the Redwood Inn, smiling at him the way she'd never smiled at my son. Here she and Ashton are at the restaurant, both dressed up but sitting in tense silence, looking anywhere but at each other. This was not the family I wanted for my son. Not the life I dreamed of for him, and certainly not the relationship I hoped to have with him in my advanced years. I closed the folder and tucked it away in a drawer, locking it away. Perhaps Selma was right, and someday I would find the strength to reach out for reconciliation, but not now. Right now, I need time to heal my own wounds, to figure out what to do next with what's left of my family. Lying in bed, I thought about Selma's words. Give him another chance. It sounded reasonable, even honorable. But was there any justice in it? How many chances had I given Ashton before? And how many had he given me? Our relationship had always been complicated. Two stubborn men, unable to express their feelings, admit mistakes, ask for forgiveness. Maybe that's what had brought us to today. The disastrous dinner, the revelations, the tears, the accusations. I rolled over onto my side, looking at the empty half of the bed where Vivian had once slept. What would she say to me now? Probably the same thing Selma had said. Give him a chance, Leo. He's your son. Blood from blood. But I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I wasn't sure I could forget how he'd kept quiet when Belinda yelled at me, how he'd hidden his problems for years, choosing lies over frank conversation, how he'd let our relationship turn into a farce where I was just a potential source of money. No, I decided, falling asleep. I won't call Ashton. I won't make the first move. If he really wanted a relationship, let him take the initiative. And if he doesn't, well, then so be it. I'll live the rest of my life without my son like he's without his father. Not the ideal scenario, but at least it's honest. And honesty has always been more important to me than anything else, even family ties. It's been a week since that ill-fated dinner. 7 long days in which I hadn't received a single call from Ashton. No apology, no explanation, not even a formal "what's up?" The silence was more eloquent than any words. Selma, who stopped by every day, tactfully didn't mention my son, but I could see the question in her eyes. I just shook my head and she nodded understandingly. There was no call. Saturday morning was surprisingly clear and warm. I'd been working in the garden since early morning, planting tomato plants I'd bought at the farmer's market the day before. Physical labor has always helped me clear my head, take my mind off unpleasant thoughts. Digging or tying up plants leaves little room for regret and resentment. It was about 11 o'clock when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Through a gap in the fence, I saw Ashton's silver sedan parked in front of my house. I straightened up, taking off my gloves and shaking my knees off the ground. So I decided to come after all. I wondered if it was remorse, shame, or a new financial necessity that made him do it. I took my time at the gate, giving him time to gather his thoughts. Finally, I heard the doorbell ring, tentative, short. I walked slowly through the house, opened the door, and saw my son, pale, with circles under his eyes, noticeably thinner than he had lost that week. "Hi, Dad," he said quietly. "Can I come in?" I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. He went into the living room and stopped in the middle of the room, looking around hesitantly, as if he were here for the first time. "Tea? Coffee?" I asked, more out of politeness than hospitality. "No thanks," he shook his head. "I won't be long, it's just, we need to talk." I nodded, pointing to the chair across from the couch. I sat down on the couch myself, arms crossed over my chest, a protective posture, but I couldn't bring myself to relax. "I'm listening," I said, as the silence stretched on. Ashton took a deep breath, as if about to dive into cold water. "I came to apologize," he began, "for the other night, for keeping silent when Belinda said those things. I should have stepped in, stopped her." "I know." I nodded, accepting his apology, but not commenting on it. I wondered what else he was going to say, where this conversation was going. "And about the poker." He lowered his gaze, rubbing the edge of his shirt. "It was true, I've played. Lost more than I could afford. It's like a disease, Dad. I couldn't stop." "And Belinda?" I asked her straight up. "Are her meetings with that realtor true too?" Ashton flinched as if struck by a blow, but nodded. "Yes." She confessed when I showed her the pictures from your report. Said it had been going on for 6 months. "You showed her the report?" I was surprised. "Why?" "I wanted her to know I knew everything." He grinned bitterly. Ironically, she didn't even really deny it. Said Trevor understood her, supported her, didn't judge her for spending, unlike me. I watched my son, broken, lost, but still trying to maintain his dignity. Part of me wanted to get up, walk over, hug him, tell him everything was going to be okay. But the other part, the rational, wary part, held me in place. Too much had been said and done to fix everything with one conversation. "What now?" I asked. "Are you getting a divorce?" "No." Ashton looked up, and I saw a strange determination in his eyes. "We decided to try again. She broke up with Trevor and I promised to quit poker. We're starting from scratch." I couldn't hold back a skeptical grin. "And you believe that's going to work? After everything that's happened?" "It has to work," he said stubbornly. "We don't have a choice. We're in debt, Dad. If we divorce now, we're both dead. Neither she nor I have the money to start over. That's it." It's not love. It's not affection. It's not wanting to keep the family together. It's financial necessity. They stayed together not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't afford to break up. And what do you want from me? I asked bluntly. Money for a fresh start? No! He shook his head, but too quickly, too decisively. That's not what I came for. I wanted a relationship. You're my father, the only family I have left.
What about Belinda?
I raised an eyebrow. Isn't she your family? Ashton was silent, and there was more truth in that silence than in anything he'd said. Look, Ashton, I leaned forward, looking him straight in the eye. I appreciate you coming forward, for admitting your mistakes, but I don't believe that you and Belinda really want to make things right. You're just cornered looking for a way out. And what's wrong with that? He suddenly raised his voice. Yes, we're desperate. Yes, we need help. But isn't that what families are for? To support each other in times of need? Family is not just about financial support, I answered calmly. It's also about honesty, trust, respect. Where has that been all these years? Where was it when I was in the hospital and you couldn't find time to visit me? Where was it when Belinda was going through my bank statements? You don't understand. Ashton shook his head. We were desperate. I was losing money. Belinda was spending more than we could afford. We got confused, started lying to each other, hiding expenses. It's like a snowball. It starts small, and then it gets out of control. I understand more than you think, I said quietly. I've been married for 38 years, Ashton. Your mom and I went through some tough times too. But we never lied to each other, never cheated, never used each other. And you've never made a mistake? He looked at me with a challenge. Never regretted something, never wanted to fix something. Of course I have, I nodded. My biggest mistake was not teaching you responsibility, letting you think that I would always be there to solve your problems, that I should sacrifice everything for you just because I'm your father. Ashton jumped up, his face red with anger. Is that how you see it? I'm your mistake? A spoiled brat who came begging? No. I stood up too, but kept my composure. You're my son whom I love. But I can't help you if you don't want to help yourself. I can't give you money knowing that it will go to cover debts incurred through irresponsibility. I can't support your marriage to a woman who doesn't respect you or me. Then what do you want? He spread his hands. You want me to divorce Belinda, drop everything and start from scratch? At 42 with debt and no education? I want you to be honest with yourself, I replied. I want you to realize that money won't solve your problems, that you won't be happy with a woman who cheats on you and only sees you as the breadwinner, that you deserve better than a life of constant fear and lies. Ashton sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. I can't, Dad. His voice sounded muffled. I just can't give it all up. I don't have your strength, your confidence. I'm confused, and I don't know how to get out. I looked at him, at my grown son, who now seemed so vulnerable, so lost. Part of me wanted to reach out, to tell him it would be okay, that I would help him, but I knew that would be a lie. Some things a man has to decide for himself, or he'll never learn to stand on his own 2 feet. I can't solve your problems, Ashton, I said softly. But I can give you some advice. Find a good psychologist. Work on your gambling addiction. Decide what you really want out of life. And if your marriage is really worth saving, fight for it together. Not out of financial necessity, but out of love and respect. What about you? He looked up at me. Will you help me? I'll be there for you, I said. And it was true. But not with money, and not with unconditional support for your decisions if I think they're wrong. Ashton nodded slowly, accepting my terms. He looked disappointed but not surprised. I think deep down he knew that's what I was going to say. I understand, he said finally. You're probably right. I have to deal with my own problems. Yeah, I nodded. But that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. There are specialists, support groups, people to help you. What about Belinda? He asked quietly. Do you think we should stay together? I sighed. It was a complicated question, and there was no easy answer. I can't answer that question for you, I said honestly, but I can tell you that a marriage based on financial necessity rather than love and respect is rarely a happy one. Ask yourself this: if you had enough money to start over, would you stay with her? Ashton was silent, and in that silence was an answer he didn't dare say out loud. "I'll think about what you said," he said at last, rising. "Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry about the other night." I nodded, accepting his apology. I walked him to the door, and we hugged awkwardly quickly, formally, like people who weren't used to physical displays of affection. "Call me when you're ready to talk some more," I said, opening the door. "No, Belinda. No money talk. Just like father and son." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. I didn't believe such a conversation would ever happen. Maybe he was right. Maybe too much water had passed, too many resentments had built up. To start over, I watched his car pull out of the yard and felt a strange desolation. Not relief, not sadness, not anger, just emptiness, as if something important had ended, leaving only silence. Back in the house, I sat in the chair, staring at the phone. I needed to call Norman Willis, my lawyer, to ask him to make one more change to my will. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. The receptionist put me through to Norman, who, despite having the day off, was in the office. "Leo," he greeted me. "Is it urgent?" "I want to make one more change to the will," I said without preamble. "I want to leave Ashton only the minimum legal inheritance. Everything else to Selma." The pause on the other end of the line was brief but emphatic. "Are you sure?" Norman asked at last. "It's a big decision, Leo. Maybe we should think about it some more." "I've thought about it," I answered firmly. "The decision is final. When can you prepare the documents?" "By Monday," he sighed. "Come by at 10 in the morning, if it's convenient for you." "I'll be there." I thanked him and hung up the phone, feeling the weight on my heart getting a little lighter. The decision had been made, and it was the right decision. Ashton would get his rightful share, but no more. The rest would go to the man who truly cared about me, expecting nothing in return. The doorbell rang, interrupting my musings. Selma stood on the doorstep with a basket of fresh buns. "I baked too many," she said with a smile. "I thought you might like some hot cinnamon buns." I let her into the house, and she noticed my mood right away. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting the basket on the table. "You look like you've made a big decision." "I did," I nodded. Ashton came by. We talked. She froze, waiting for me to continue. I briefly told her about our conversation, that Ashton had admitted his mistakes but was still clinging to his marriage to Belinda because of financial difficulties, that I had decided to change my will, leaving my son only a minimal share. "Are you sure that's the right decision?" she asked, softly, not judging, just clarifying. "I'm sure," I nodded. Ashton needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, to deal with his own problems. As long as he knows he's getting my inheritance, he has no incentive to change. Selma nodded thoughtfully, pouring us tea. "You know," she said, handing me a cup, "I think that true family isn't necessarily those who are related to us by blood. It's those who choose to be there for us, who care for us without expecting anything in return." "Like you," I smiled, raising my cup in salute. "Like all of us." She waved her hand toward the window that overlooked the Harrisons' house, the elderly couple who lived next door. "Robert, who helped you with the roof last fall. Elaine, who brings you soup when you're sick. Even old George with his perpetual grumbling who still shovels snow from your driveway when you can't go out." I nodded, feeling something warm spill into my chest. She was right. Over the years, my neighbors had become closer to me than my own son. They'd taken care of me without asking for anything in return, just because that was the way it was in our little community, to help each other, to be there for each other in times of need. "You know what I realized today?" I said, looking at Selma. That at my age, I'm finally free to live the life I want. No obligations to an ungrateful family, no need to conform to anyone's expectations. I can just be myself. And who is this you yourself? She asked with a slight smile. What does Leonard Pierce want out of his remaining years, I wondered. It was a good question to which I had no ready answer. Peace, I said at last. The simple pleasures of working in the garden, a good book, a heartfelt conversation with a friend, the ability to wake up in the morning and not think about other people's problems, about money, about obligations. Just to live in the here and now, enjoying each day. Sounds like a good plan, Selma nodded. And you know what? I think you deserve it. After all the years of hard work, taking care of your family, doing your duty, you've earned that freedom. I looked at her, this amazing woman who had come into my life so unexpectedly and had become such an important part of it. Not a relative, not a lover, just a friend, just someone who understood and accepted me for who I was. Thank you, I said, and those two words encompassed so much more than they seemed to. For what? She smiled. For the scones? They're really good, but not that good. For what you are, I answered simply. For reminding me that life doesn't end when loved ones pass away, that you can start over even at 67, especially at 67, she corrected me. When you know exactly what you want and you're not afraid to go for it. We finished our tea, talking about simple things, the garden, the new recipe Selma wanted to try, the documentary we were going to see tonight. Ordinary conversation between ordinary people, but there was more warmth and understanding in it than in all my conversations with my son over the years. When Selma left, I went back to the garden, back to my tomatoes. As I worked the soil, I thought about our conversation, about her words about a real family. She was right, family isn't necessarily those who are related to us by blood. It's those who choose to be there for us, who care, who make our lives better. Ashton was my son, and I will always love him, but our paths have diverged, and maybe it was better for both of us. He has to learn to live his life, to deal with his problems, and I have to learn to let go, not just of him, but of my own expectations, disappointments and resentments. Life goes on, and at my age, I finally realized that I can live it the way I want to live it, calmly, with dignity, surrounded by people who really care about me. No drama, no manipulation, no constant guilt and obligation. I straightened up, looking at my home. Small but cozy, filled with memories of Vivian, of our life together. Here I had been happy, here I had experienced loss, here I had found new meaning, and here I would live out my remaining years, not alone, but surrounded by people I had chosen myself and who had chosen me. The thought brought me a strange relief, as if the weight I had carried on my shoulders for years had finally disappeared. I was free from expectations, from obligations, from having to conform to someone else's idea of what a father, a grandfather, the head of the family should be. I was just Leonard Pierce, a 67-year-old man who had finally learned to live for himself. And there was a special wisdom in that.